Good afternoon. Hi, I have the honor of leading the Technical Service Provider Program branch at the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service as Acting TSP Program Branch Chief. Soon, you will meet a few of the smart and energetic staff working every day to expand and streamline the TSP program. These staff and others have worked tirelessly to provide a new and improved TSP registry for applications and renewals, and to find a TSP site that provides better and easier resources for producers and landowners to find the best match for their operation. Today's training is meant to be an overview of our Technical Service Provider program. Our main focus of this presentation is to provide potential TSPs with the knowledge and resources you need to determine if the Technical Service Provider program is the right fit for you, and to encourage folks with the right technical skills to apply to be a TSP and help us help farmers put conservation on their land. We know that we also have participation from many of our current partners, some farmers, ranchers, and forest landowners that our programs support, and even a few USDA colleagues looking to learn more about how they can better leverage TSPs in their state. The role of a technical service provider is meant to amplify the benefits of our programs, expanding when and where we are able to offer our services, and provide a customized experience for those agricultural producers who benefit from a third-party approach. As we go through these steps and considerations today, we hope that the information better outlines opportunities for all our stakeholders and ultimately increases voluntary conservation on the farm. This includes getting the word out to as many knowledgeable, experienced, educated, and professional individuals that may choose to become part of that support system for our country's producers. With your help, we expect future opportunities for TSPs to expand and to be able to provide more efficient opportunities for our customers to find solutions to their natural resource needs with USDA. Thank you again for joining us today. And now I'll pass the microphone to Allison for the remainder of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Katina, and hello, everyone. My name is Allison Aquino. I'm on the National TSP branch for NRCS, and will be presenting during today's meeting. Today's agenda, pretty basic. We'll go through the basics of NRCS and what technical service providers are, what type of services TSPs offer to our agricultural producers, a brief overview of the TSP certification process, and then a few slides on just working with NRCS, collaborating to ultimately benefit those producers. So getting started, what is NRCS? We are a non-regulatory agency under the U.S. Department of Agriculture. We provide completely voluntary technical and financial assistance to agricultural producers, and our programs and our efforts are meant to address natural resource concerns. So again, completely voluntary, people come to us. And so we have agricultural producers we work with. Those who are eligible for our financial assistance programs can apply and be funded. And the primary program we're going to touch on a few times today is called EQIP. That's the acronym, the Environmental Quality Incentives Program. So you'll hear me reference that quite a few times today. But we do have several programs under the Farm Bill that support our agricultural community. So what is a TSP? TSPs, certified NRCS TSPs, are technical experts in their field that have been certified by us for specific types of technical assistance. So developing conservation plans, designing conservation practices, overseeing the installation and certifying that conservation practices have been installed. Certification requirements To become a TSP really vary based on what service you want to offer and that location, so state or territory in which you apply to offer those services. TSPs are hired by our program participants. So you're working with them for them to provide the technical assistance that they've requested towards reaching their conservation goals, which vary from person to person and operation to operation. TSPs can really be any discipline that overlaps with our NRCS services. So I've listed out a few of them here just to give you some more specifics, but you could also just be kind of a generalist, someone with a natural resources background that maybe knows a little bit about a few or a lot of these things. Very quick overview just to get us started from a TSP's perspective about what working as a TSP looks like. So a technical expert becomes a certified TSP through the NRCS certification process. Your name would then appear in our Find a TSP database. So you would again be certified for specific services, certain locations. Then you're available to, your name is on that list to be selected by one of our program participants who would like to work with a TSP. So then you would be contacted by one of these producers, one of our participants who has a NRCS contract, so a funded contract for financial assistance. And you guys can just have those conversations. This is what I'd like to do. This is my project. You're a TSP. Does that work? Review those project details, talk about terms and timing and payment. And if it's a good fit for both of you, you would be hired to then perform those specific technical services. You would complete the deliverables for whatever that work is, and those deliverables, those work products, those documents would be reviewed together and then submitted to NRCS. NRCS would review, say, yes, all the deliverables are met, and then we process that payment. Take a quick minute here just to highlight that all NRCS payments are done as reimbursement. The funding for those is distributed after the work is complete. So what do TSPs do? We're going to discuss each of these in much more depth in the next few slides, but they can really be broken up into two primary categories here, the conservation activities and the 900 series. So the conservation activities are the CPA, conservation planning activities, the DIAs, design and implementation activities, and the CEMAs, conservation evaluation and monitoring activities. And then the 900 series is 911 design, 912 installation, which is really the quality assurance aspect, that technical support during the installation or application of a conservation practice. It's not for the physical labor of doing the work itself. And then 913, which is doing the certification that a conservation practice has been installed that meets NRCS standards and specs and what that final quantity is. A CPA, conservation planning activity, is essentially a summary of a producer's natural resource concerns, their goals, and then recommendations from a technical expert of how they can achieve those. So where they're at and where they want to get to. You can see the 6 bullets here. These are the CPAs that were available as of fiscal year 2025. And you'll see that some of them have different focuses on different land uses or a goal such as organic transition. And then the bottom one there is CPA 199, which is a kind of a catch-all general planning. If it doesn't fit into one of the other categories, then the 199 conservation plan can be utilized. As a TSP, you would be essentially providing a summary of different elements, 4 of which are listed here. So you're producing a standalone document for that customer, which they can use to make land management decisions with. So likely have maps in there with different information, might have assessments. It would list their goals, document their goals, and then provide some alternatives, again, to go from where they are to what those goals are, how to get them from point A to point B. And those alternatives are typically a combination of conservation practices that they could apply that would take them to those goals that they have identified in that plan. So to see the deliverables for each of the conservation planning activities, those deliverables, what those work products are that a TSP would be providing, you can start on this conservation activities website. That link was provided as well. This is just what the front of the web page looks like. And then if you scroll down a little bit, you'll see all these different documents. These are each a standalone PDF for that conservation activity. So you can click on the link to the one you want to see, and it will show you that primary document, right? A definition, different land uses that this conservation activity can be applied on, and then it will get into some of the requirements and deliverables for that conservation planning activity. So what is the TSP payment rate to complete those deliverables? So each state has an EQIP payment schedule. We did put a link to that in the chat as well. And this is where you would go to see what the payment rate for the conservation planning activities are. Keep in mind, these payment rates can change from year to year, and they can actually even vary between counties in the same state. So as you're working on a project or considering working on a project, make sure you go to the fiscal year in which that contract was funded and looking at the county rate for those services. So as you can see in these two examples here, the CPA 106 Forest Management Plan has different components, and the Conservation Plan Supporting Organic Transition, the CPA 138, also has different components. So you can see how the payment rates vary based on complexity or size. The second conservation activity we'll discuss are the DIAs, so the design and implementation activities. Again, the word implementation is used here because TSP deliverables often contain information related to implementation, so details for when that practice is implemented. DIAs are an activity that designs either a single conservation practice or a group of conservation practices that resulted in that decision-making of the client. So either through a CPA or through conservation planning efforts with NRCS staff. It's important to point out here too that as a TSP, you would become certified for a DIA, but because that DIA is kind of more of an envelope, you would be designing the actual conservation practices that are associated with that DIA. So let's, for an example here, use the DIA 148 pollinator habitat design. If our customer has selected these 3 practices and you are going to perform the design services for this under the DIA 148, the DIA 148 is kind of more like an envelope, and it's housing these different conservation practices. So as a TSP, you would need to be certified for the DIA 148, hedgerow planting, which the code there is 422, 327 conservation cover, and 645 upland wildlife habitat management. I just pulled these 3 practices in here just to use as a visual example here. So those aren't always the 3 that'll be associated with pollinator habitat design. Might be more, might be less, might be different, but just for the sake of discussion. So keep that in mind as you're looking at what you would like to become certified for. It would be the DIAs plus any of the common practices that you might design under that. The deliverables for a DIA are the details of that planned conservation practice. So let's continue the example from the previous slide and say you are going to be designing a hedgerow. So that would take it from the decision of, we would benefit having a 100-acre hedgerow on this section of the farm to attract native pollinators and beneficial insects. So the DIA portion would then pull out all the details of what that hedgerow would look like, right? So we have actual plant species. Which species of plants are going to be in this hedgerow? How many of each? What is the spacing? What does the ground prep for those species look like? What are the irrigation needs? And so on. So that's really where that design element comes in. And just have some other examples here from some of the other DIAs as well. Again, the NRCS payment rates for DIAs are listed in the EQIP payment schedule. Again, you can see the components here that reflect a variation of size or complexity of the designs. And these are all from fiscal year 2025. So they're just here for examples and to show you how the information is arranged. Before we move on, I just wanted to mention that as you're deciding which services you might want to become a TSP for, consider these sort of complementary activities. So if you look at the list of available CPAs and the list of available DIAs, you'll see that there are some that are complementary, often ones that are contracted together, that are funded together. So if you're going to become certified for CPA 102, you might also want to consider becoming certified for DIA 101 because you'll often see those two together, and so on. There's forestry activities that are compatible in that same way and others. So just take a look at that and keep those in mind as you're making your decisions. The third and last conservation activity we'll discuss are the CEMAs. So again, the conservation evaluation and monitoring activity. CEMAs are an evaluation, a test, an assessment of some aspect of the property. They can be utilized before the conservation planning, before the CPA, or they can be utilized after a project is complete, after conservation practices are installed to assess the results, or really anywhere in between that makes sense for what that producer is trying to achieve. But CEMAs are a little different than the other two. CEMAs do not have to be completed by a certified TSP. They are completed by what is called a qualified individual. You see the acronym QI. Each CEMA has its own list of what someone would need to have to be qualified to perform that CEMA. NRCS does not certify qualified individuals like we do with our TSPs. The program participant is responsible for selecting someone who meets that criteria to be considered a qualified individual in order to complete that CEMA. So it's similar to a program participant hiring a contractor to do something. So we don't maintain a list, and NRCS does not need to approve the selection. It's up to the program participant to do that. But as a TSP, if it's in that same discipline that you work in and that you're qualified to, that you've been certified to do other TSP services for, it's likely that you would be qualified to also complete a CEMA. So we want to make sure it's mentioned here. So the resulting products of the CEMA, like we said, are really these valuations, these assessments. There's a lot of them, as you saw on that previous slide. There's some really interesting opportunities. So take a look at those. One that I wanted to point out, the example in the upper right-hand corner, soil tests for heavy metals or other contaminants is a great CEMA to use for urban agriculture, somewhere where maybe the land history, you know, that there are assumed that there might be some contaminants, or you're unsure of what the land history was there and you want to dive into that a little bit more and learn more about the conditions of that property before any planning continues or is moved forward. Okay, so we've discussed the conservation activities, and we'll move on to the 900 series. So 911 design, 912 installation quality assurance, and 913 the certification of completion of a conservation practice are TSP services that essentially mimic the technical responsibilities of NRCS staff for specific conservation practices that are in a funded Farm Bill contract. So disclaimer at this time, the 900 codes, those technical service provider payment rates, or TSPRs, as you'll see in the payment schedules, are not currently available in every state. We are working on expanding their availability, so keep an eye out for that, but we're going to mention them here because they are a TSP service and they are available in some states at this time. So the basic process regarding the utilization of the 900 series, an NRCS program participant has been funded through one of our Farm Bill financial assistance program contracts for one or more conservation practices. They request additional funding is added to that contract through a contract modification so that they can use a TSP for 911, 912, and or 913, whichever services they would like, for one or more of those conservation practices. We do a contract modification, add the funding in. they select a TSP, and that selected TSP then completes the deliverables for those funded services. And when the services are complete, again, payment is reimbursed by NRCS. So a very simplified example of what that might look like. If someone has a contract with us, they apply for and are funded for an irrigation system. In this case, we just used a micro irrigation system, 441 micro irrigation, on an orchard or vineyard that's greater than 10 acres. So the payment rate for that to purchase the materials and install the micro irrigation system, the payment rate from NRCS to that producer is the $1,324.99 per acre. So that is a payment for the program participant. They can take that funding, do the work themselves. They can hire an irrigation company, whatever is their preference. They get reimbursed from NRCS when the installed practice meets our standards and specifications. When it's functional, we make that reimbursement to them. Now, in a situation where they wanted to use a TSP, we would add those additional technical assistance funds through a contract modification. So if they wanted to use a TSP for 911, 912, and 913, it might look something like this. So we add these additional contract items 2, 3, and 4, and each of those line items is specific to that service. So this would be for a TSP to complete the design for the irrigation system. The payment rate for that is $56.92 per acre, and these rates are old, so these are not, you wouldn't find these in the payment schedules now, but they're just here for the example. And so on. So there'd be additional funding for the 912 step and additional funding for the 913 step in the process. These all have different deliverables, and they're all for a TSP to do that work. Now, if you are a TSP, and you have been hired by a program participant to perform those duties of a TSP, either through 911, 912, and or 913. You can also be hired to do the work itself. So this question comes up a lot, so we wanted to make sure we had a slide in here that covered it. So it doesn't prohibit you from being hired if you have a company or you do this work on your own. So you can perform both roles. They're very separate. There's separate funding, there's separate deliverables, separate expectations. So let's use an example of a fence. You're a TSP. You have been hired to design and assist with the installation oversight and the certification of a livestock fence. That's a cross fence to help with livestock distribution. So as a TSP, you would design that fence, right? Specify the fence height and all of the different design elements that come with the fence. You would be a technical support during the installation, and you would certify that the final installed fence meets NRCS standards and specifications and what the length of fence is. And again, if that same customer chooses to hire you to be the contractor to actually provide the materials and installation of that fence, you can also do that. They're, again, separate roles. You can perform both even if you are a TSP. I want to highlight just a few details about the 900 series. So again, the 900 codes are not currently available in all states, but we're hoping that that changes in the very near future. The availability of those payment rates and what those dollar amounts are generally vary by state and can also vary by county. So again, make sure that you're looking at the payment rates for the location of the project. Those payment rates for the 911, 912, and 913 are not to exceed rates. So TSPs who are hired to do that work have to submit an invoice, and so their costs factor into the final payment. So those rates, again, are not to exceed rates. If the invoice per unit is less, they would be paid on the lesser amount. And NRCS develops these payment rates based on an estimate of the number of hours it takes to complete those deliverables. So we look at what that service is for that practice, and we take the number of hours we estimate it takes a TSP to complete those deliverables and multiply that by what is, we hope, a fair per hour wage that someone with that technical capacity would typically charge or typically make. The deliverables for all of these 900 services are found on the statement of work document. So each conservation practice has its own statement of work document. Those are all housed in the NRCS Field Office Technical Guide, or FOTOG, as you might hear it referred to. This is a publicly available website. I believe the link was also provided. So if you go into FOTOG, you'll select your state and then go to section 4 and find the statement of work for whatever the practice is that that service is meant to support. And sorry, this is a little small, so I have a close-up, but this is what the statement of work document might look like. You'll see that that has different sections for the design, which corresponds to the 911, installation, which corresponds to the 912, again, not actual installation quality assurance, and then checkout, which is the 913 step there. So just kind of taking a closer look. This is what the deliverables might look like. And then if you ever have any questions about what this deliverable means or what the expectation is for this, we really encourage you to talk to your NRCS field office staff to get a better understanding of what that looks like, because depending on the project, it can really vary. So the payment rates for the 900 services are also on the state payment schedules. Here I have an example from Utah from fiscal year 25. So you can see that this is just a quick part of one of the pages here that shows the 911 TA technical assistance design and the different TSPRs, or technical service provider payment rate, that are associated with the different practices and the practice components. And again, those unit costs are per unit, so it varies. It could be a single unit, like a number, could be per foot, could be per acre. And those are those not to exceed rates that I mentioned earlier. As a TSP, it's really important that you look at these rates before you agree to a job, because we want to make sure that it's going to fairly compensate you for the amount of time and effort it's going to take to really produce a quality product, so that our customers are getting the outcomes and getting what they are hoping to get from these programs and these projects. So just taking a look here, just for this example, the 516 livestock pipeline, the payment rate per foot in Utah as of 2025 for design was 41 cents a foot. So depending on how many feet of pipeline are in that contract or in that plan, that would be the not to exceed total for a TSP to design a livestock pipeline for that project. Then again, compare it to the statement of work. So this is the livestock pipeline deliverable for 911 in Utah for the same year. So you did look at those deliverables and say, yes, that is a fair rate, or that's not going to work for me. But it's important to understand, again, what those deliverables are, what you would be doing as a TSP, and make sure that it's going to work for you, so that everyone is satisfied with the outcomes in the long run. This slide is just an overview of the sort of the funding path for TSPs. So again, funding for TSP services is obligated as an individual line item in an NRCS Farm Bill contract. As a reminder, those contracts are just between NRCS and the program participant. So the program participant then hires the TSP. So then, as I mentioned, the program participant would select and hire that TSP. They would discuss, the deliverables would be completed, those work products would be completed, talk about it amongst themselves, make sure everything's there, make sure the goals have been met, submit that documentation to NRCS. A payment is typically made to the program participant, and then that program participant can pay the TSP according to whatever their predetermined arrangement is or was. A few more critical details on TSP payments. The first one's a little more relevant to those 900 services and the conservation activities, but our final payments, whether it's for a conservation practice or for a TSP service, it's based on that final quantity. So for a TSP, let's go back to that fence example. If someone has a fence, is funded to install fence, let's say 1,000 feet of fence, and a TSP is brought in to complete 911, 912, and 913 for that project. The contracted amount of fence will say 1,000 feet. So the TSP will design 1,000 feet of fence. And that's what the payment for 911 design would be for the TSP. Now, if the fence is installed and the actual final length of that fence is 950 feet, then that is the quantity on which a TSP and the customer would be paid for the 912, 913, and the conservation practice, because that's the final amount. That was the amount, the length that was that those installation and completion deliverables were completed for. The second is that the TSPs are welcome to arrange any kind of alternative rate or services with the client ahead of time. We have our NRCS contract, but obviously TSPs and the program participants, our producers, can arrange whatever they would like to arrange, whatever services that TSP would like to provide is up to them. And the NRCS contracts can just be one element of the project as a whole. And then lastly, all of the work always has to meet NRCS standards, specifications, and policy. So let's walk through how a technical expert becomes an NRCS certified TSP. So again, to be a certified TSP, you have to go through the certification process, identifying the services that you wish to offer and the locations. All of the certification criteria is listed on the NRCS TSP website. And those requirements for certification vary by activity, they vary between practices, and they can vary between geographic locations because each state might have additional requirements. So typically it's a combination of different combinations of technical trainings that NRCS provides. Work experience can be a factor. Professional certifications can come into play. Sometimes you will be asked to provide a sample of work. And then again, those state-specific requirements. So each state has an opportunity to establish specific requirements for those services in their state. So there can be up to 3 different paths through the TSP certification process. We'll look at some different options here. The example of pasture and hay planting or conservation practice standard 512. So to become a certified TSP for pasture and hay planting, you really have 3 different routes. If you have this professional certification, that is one path. If you have the combination of education and experience that's listed here, that's a second path. And if you just have experience, then that option there for having 4 years of experience is the third path. Forest Stand Improvement or Conservation Practice Standard 666 has 2 different paths. So professional certification, in this case, it also requires a sample of work, or a combination of education and experience that also requires a sample of work. And then lastly, Comprehensive Nutrient Management Plan, CNMP, CPA 102 has one option. And I wanted to highlight this one here to make sure that everyone is aware that some of the conservation activities do have multiple NRCS trainings required for certification. Some of these trainings are offered online, some are only in person, and although the trainings are offered at no cost to the TSP, they do take time, and any costs for travel for any of the in-person trainings are also the responsibility of the TSP. So as you're deciding which services you want to offer, the certification requirements should absolutely be a part of that thought process. So a quick summary of the process of becoming a certified TSP. Individuals with those qualifications can submit an application through the NRCS registry website. There's a certification agreement that the TSP signs. There's an example on the TSP website if you'd like to view that and see what the language is there. It will have statements regarding legal responsibilities. It will list the services that you've been certified to perform and in which locations you can perform those services. And then once you're certified, then your name is added to the Find a TSP database that our program participants can review and select from. So what are the benefits of being an NRCS certified TSP? Well, obviously income. So TSPs are paid to complete these complete technical assistance for our program participants. But that can be expanded out a little bit. We mentioned before, you could also be hired to complete the actual construction or implementation of those conservation practices in the same contract. And this is also an opportunity to meet new potential customers for services outside of an NRCS contract. Getting work as a TSP is definitely something to think through and consider. New TSPs may be comfortable just relying on the Find a TSP database to connect them with potential customers, but there's other approaches you can take as well, right? So you can advertise, make sure people in your agricultural community are aware that you're a certified TSP, that you can perform these services. So maybe that's your own business website. Maybe there's a professional certification website that wants to highlight the use of TSPs. Whatever direction you go, we wanted to make sure that you always remember to make sure that the contact information in Find a TSP is accurate. We've definitely had folks who changed their email address or their phone number and were not able to be contacted. So just keep that in mind. We really want to encourage you to engage with NRCS staff at the state or local level, especially so you can learn about those programs in the state. So different states might have different subsets of funding that go towards topics or land use or resource concerns that are that they want to highlight, they want to focus on. So as a TSP, knowing about those can be beneficial for you. There's NRCS meetings you can attend, different trainings, public meetings, just to kind of get more familiar with the staff or the programs, projects, directions that our agency is going with our different opportunities. You're welcome to introduce new clients or existing clients to the NRCS program. Sometimes you'll be working with people that they want to do something with their land that is a great fit for our program. So introducing them to the NRCS programs and then getting TSP funding through potential financial assistance contracts is a great way to get work as a TSP. And then just kind of knowing what services might be in higher demand or where there might be a regional specialty that you could become certified for is also really helpful. Sometimes states have a lot of the same type of work. Irrigation or nutrient management, they might be a real high need for high demand from our customers for those types of services. And so if you're qualified to be a TSP for those things, then you might have more of a chance of getting work because it's going to be in higher demand. Or conversely, if you have a specialty where if you look and find a TSP and there's either no one listed there or one or two people listed there, that if you could become certified for that, then as people go in there to look, your name would be on a shorter list. So just a quick summary of our agency's organization as it relates to the TSP program. These are typically the folks that you would be interacting with as a TSP. So we have our national office. There is a TSP regional coordinator assigned to each state and territory. So the TSP regional coordinator is really going to be your primary point of contact through that certification process, the recertification process, or modifying your service area and just general support. And each state has a TSP coordinator. So they are going to assist with a review of any samples of work that are required during the certification process, or establishing those state level requirements as well. And then NRCS further breaks down into different areas within states. So you might have area specialists that are going to be more technical in nature, might help you with better understanding the deliverables on the statement of work or the standards and specifications for the conservation practices. And then ultimately the field office is likely who you'll be interacting with the most. The supervisory position in each field office is called the district conservationist, and they're going to be who you interact with more about those specific contracts, about adding TSP funds through modification, payments, program policy, all those types of things. Having clarity of roles and responsibilities and expectations are really critical through the process for NRCS, for the TSP, and especially for the program participant. So we want to make sure that some of these aspects are highlighted for new TSPs, for all TSPs. So although you would never be expected to be a program expert, as a TSP, it can be helpful for you to have an understanding, just sort of a basic knowledge of NRCS programs and processes, what our contracting processes are like, timelines, deadlines. That'll just kind of help you to see where you fit in and expectations for things in that time frame, and knowing where funding is going and knowing how funding is distributed. It can be helpful as a TSP to understand those things. The second thing is that TSPs do need to provide their own equipment and software. So if you're considering becoming certified for a TSP service that requires surveying equipment or a specific type of software, that would be a TSP's responsibility to provide those things. NRCS doesn't provide equipment or software or other resources. Obviously, we collaborative approach to communicating and sharing information about the project and whatever is going to make that flow and outcome better. But as far as equipment and software, that's the responsibility of the TSP. As you work more as a TSP or have conversations with NRCS, becoming more familiar with what those deliverables are and what completeness of a work product means is going to make everyone's experience better as well. Both so, you know, efforts aren't underestimated, but also so that you don't spend too much time on something that doesn't need to be, you know, as long or take as much time. So just to, you know, make sure that that is communicated clearly to you and that you understand what your role is and what those deliverables look like. And, you know, there might be opportunities to request a template or an example product if something is particularly complex. And then just as a reminder that TSPs are working for our producers, our program participants, and to review those final work products with them, make sure everyone's comfortable with the final quantity or what the outcome of that document is before submitting to NRCS. And that's especially so that our participants are getting, like I mentioned earlier, what they want out of this experience. Okay, so what's next? So at the conclusion of this meeting, we hope that you are interested, and recommend that you take a closer look at these aspects of the TSP program so you can really make an informed decision for yourself. So what is your technical discipline? Which of your qualifications overlap with our national and state level criteria? So take a look at those documents on the TSP website and see if maybe something you already are qualified for, or maybe something that you want to work on becoming qualified for. Then what is needed, what is commonly utilized, what TSP funding is available in this areas that you want to offer service. So look at those NRCS payment schedules, talk with NRCS staff, get more familiar with, does your skill set overlap with really what's needed or what the type of projects that NRCS works on in those areas that you would want to offer your service. And then again, look at those payment rates, compare them with the deliverables. Do they make financial sense to you? Do you have the capacity to complete those work products as far as time or equipment or software? You know, assess those things all together so you can make an informed decision for yourself. And then again, NRCS registry is where a TSP would submit an application and manage your TSP certification. So the link to that is found on the TSP website. So the quick overview, very quick overview, you would start an application as an individual. There is a way in registry that you can attach your name to an entity name or a business name. So when someone searches and find a TSP, that's what shows up versus your name as an individual. So that can be especially helpful if you do have a business or an entity name that you would prefer to use. Complete trainings. All TSPs have to take the TSP orientation and conservation planning course. And then if there's other trainings required, obviously you would complete those. And then upload any other support documents, submit your application, and then NRCS national staff and possibly state level staff, depending, would then go through the application, review it, and ideally approve you as a certified TSP. So if you forget everything else I said today, a lot of it is on the TSP website. has a link to the Find a TSP for our agricultural producers, has a link to registry if you choose to move forward with an application to become a TSP. And the website also has the information of the NRCS regional coordinator, so you can find your regional coordinator's name and contact information there. Thank you, everyone, for calling in, and please don't hesitate to contact your TSP regional coordinator for any follow-up questions, and we will try to get the rest of those questions answered as soon as possible. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.